So I've been trying to work out whether Swift dialogue was mentioned in every presentation over the last 3 days. I think it was, which is...
Not on that side.
How do you know? Were you in those?
I'm just assuming.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Maybe.
So it's no longer the anvil drop. It's mentioned in Swift dialogue, I think, is the X-World track.
That's the thing.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Bart Reardon. Take it away, Bart.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so this is, I've done Swift dialogue talks. There we go, I'll mention it. There we go. I've done that in the past. So this one's a bit more sort of like a general, you know, you have an idea, you want to see if you can open source it, which is really good. So I've got a little bit of experience with the process of going through that. So I thought I'd share that with you all and hopefully inspire some of you or whatever it is. So just a brief introduction. So my name's Bart Reardon. I work at the CSIRO. I've do sort of like mostly Mac admin stuff, although recently I've now doing a lot more of the Linux desktop admin, which is a thing. So yeah, that keeps me insane. So yeah, so open source stuff. There is, if you've been in the Mac admin space for a while, you know, you'll know a bunch of these apps, right? So we've got, you know, munki, autopkg. There's nomad, nomad-d. Yeah, nudge, outset. There's even a open source MDM in there. So yeah, so these, you know, things have been out in the community for a while. So we know that, you know, we've all sort of benefited from open source. The topic's come up before in previous talks. So this one's a nice one from Armin, who did a great little talk on it at Maxis Admin in Gothenburg recently. So that's a little QR code to the YouTube video. So they're uploading those to YouTube now, which is great. So you can go watch those and not bug Patrick's servers. Greg Nagel, you might know from doing a little app called Munki. So yeah, you know, again, more sort of open source stuff. He had this great slide. These are all the, well, not all the contributors, but there's a good chunk of the contributors to Munki's code base. So, you know, the capacity to, you know, help and contribute to what we do in this space is, you know, is there. So you don't have to sort of like come up with like the next greatest idea, you know, whiz bang app or anything like that. You can actually just help in existing projects and stuff like that. If you work for an organization, they're like, you know, we don't do open source or anything like that, then just, you know, check, you know, if hands up who uses Mac OS. Anyone? Because yeah, you're using open source. So, you know, there's a decent chunk of Mac OS source code. Well, the under the skin stuff is sitting up there on GitHub. Apple publishes it up there. So, you know, Mac OS 14.4 is up there. You can go have a poke around and check out the actual kernel to Darwin, which, as it says on there, sits underneath iOS and Mac OS, and I'm presuming all the other OSs as well that they provide. So yeah, so, you know, Apple's leveraging off open source. They've got a nice little page on that. So you can go and check out all the open source stuff that's in there. You can go, if you're really that way inclined, you can go contribute to Swift. I don't know if I'm that way inclined, but there's other things in there you can sort of have a bit of a play with, have a look around. I've got sort of like the two main projects I'm sort of looking at the moment that it's in this community. So one is Swift Dialogue, which may have come up a couple of times. It was written as a my love letter to the community, because all those other apps that I popped up on those other slides, I've used and taken advantage of, and I didn't pay a cent for them. So, you know, my way of contributing back is to basically say, well, I'll make something, and, you know, if like 3 people use it, that will, you know, sort of justify my feelings and all that sort of stuff. So I think I've got 3+ now using it. The other one is the green icon, which is Outset. So Joseph Chilcott, who wrote Outset in Python, took that up to version 3, and I was looking for another project that wasn't a SwiftUI project, another command line app. So I looked at porting outset from Python to Swift. Motivations for that were this is just a personal thing. In my environment, I try to not have dependencies for things that I want to deploy out if I can help it. Apple took Python away from macOS, so as the default install, I know we can put it there, but so I wanted something which was like, I can just put this on there and then it contains everything that it needs. So, and plus I get a bit more experience dealing with Swift. So that's my two sort of things that I'm sort of playing with at the moment. So you're probably thinking, you know, is there something that you can sort of do or contribute, or do you have an idea that you're thinking might be worth sort of sharing? Generally, the answer will be yes. So if you're an admin, you've been dealing with scripts, you've been dealing with IDs, you've been dealing with problems. Open sourcing doesn't have to be a compiled application, or it doesn't have to be a full sort of fledged thing. It can also be just a script that solves a problem that you have in your environment, and other people might have that problem as well. Sharing your solution has sort of two benefits. One is that you're telling the community about something that the community may not know about, and the other one is you potentially have feedback on that that can serve as improvements to it and make your own workflows better. So if you know any of these, then it's a we've got Bash, Python, Swift, Go, which is that little gopher there. There might be a little bit more about that later on. PHP, who loves PHP? Yay! PHP. So the question comes up, should you open source your app? And it's probably, the answer would be yes. Should you? Maybe. Depends. So we'd like you to open source your stuff. It's great. Ideas are worth sharing. Most of you work for places that pay your bills or pay your salaries, and so you're kind of tied to them. So the question sort of becomes, can you open source your app or idea? So if you sort of go into it with a, look, I want to share this out and all that sort of stuff, the first thing you need to do is start looking at, getting permission, working out if you can, share your code or what you've done. Who owns the code? It comes back to that slide where it says it depends. If you're getting paid 9 to 5 and you write that code 9 to 5, generally that code will be owned by the person that employs you or the organization that employs you. In some cases, if you are writing stuff in your own free time and you do it on a work computer, then work might own that. If you do it in your own free time and you use an idea that you learnt at work, that might be a problem. So this is not legal advice, but go have a chat to your employer. Ask them the question. I've got these things. I've got this stuff that I want to share. I think this is worth, throwing into the community. I think other people have got these problems, and see what they say. Unless you're in sort of like a really regulated security and there's a risk that you might expose something about that environment, the answer is probably going to be sure. All right. Or they might say, that's fine. We'll put in like a bit of a vetting process just to make sure that nothing goes out. Or they might be completely open. They say, we'll leave it up to you. Just make sure you don't put in any, anything that sort of like can identify the environment or who we are or anything like that. So go have a chat to them. On that point, get an agreement with your employer, even if writing code in your free time. So it's like I had to put the anvil in, right? It's really important. Okay, you don't want to sort of jump into it and go, great, I'll go sign up for a free GitHub and start putting up all my scripts, all right? And then end up in a situation where you've accidentally uploaded something and that information gets used and you get exploited somehow. And that could be as simple as, oh shit, I accidentally put in something like a serial number or a some sort of ID in the code, and you go, oh, that shouldn't be there. So you go and remove it and do a commit. That history is still in there, right? So I go and download that repo and I go search through all the commit history and I can go pull that out, right? So make sure that you have the clear, with your employer, and you go through that process and just, tick those boxes and all that stuff. Again, not legal advice, but highly suggested. There's a bunch of licenses you can pick from when you're open sourcing. Most of them will be fine. The question is, what type of control do you want over it? So open sourcing doesn't mean you don't have control over your code. All right, you can, unless you roll it out with GPL3, in which case you're just throwing it into the wind, or even potentially throwing the wind into your environment. Depends how you use the GPL3. But there's plenty to choose from. As you can see there, this is a little graph that I pulled off Wikipedia. Apache and MIT are fairly well representative there. Sorry releases their code mostly under MIT. We have a standard MIT-like, or we did up until about 2 years ago. Most of our stuff was MIT-like, and then the advice then was switching from MIT-like to MIT. Where that becomes handy, even though the license itself, the conditions and all that sort of stuff haven't really changed, is that GitHub doesn't know about Cyro's MIT license. And so you put the license on there and GitHub doesn't show the nice little icon that says what kind of license type this code is under. So check your license type. You can add that in if you're using GitHub or other source repositories, and they can normally identify which licenses is in there. People can go there and they'll actually be able to say, well, we agree with MIT license that we can use that, or we agree with Apache license or GPL or whatever the case might be. Handy little website, chooselicense.com. You can go in there. It explains it much better than what I can. And you can make some decisions about what kind of license you want to put your code under. And there's a screenshot of it because just to give you an idea of what's on there. So it'll give you an idea of what kind of permissions you got, what kind of conditions, and what the limitations of that license are. So there might be a limitation in that's not for you. So benefits of choosing the right kind of license. So protection, you want to be able to protect your code, protect your IP, protect what you do with that code later on. Some licenses are more restrictive than others. Some will let you change the license, or some will force you to use that license forevermore. So you just want to make sure that you take that into consideration when you're looking at those kind of things. Fairness is picking a general license that's not something that your organization has made up, like what we used to do. It's an assurance that you are complying with the conditions of that license that you are saying you're going to do, and that your customers are actually going to expect from you. So it's a bit of it's a visual contract to say that this is how you're going to treat the code here, and this is how you're going to treat people sort of coming into the code. So there's some benefits to open sourcing, of course, which is why we would like people to do it. So as mentioned before, some collaboration. You can put your stuff out there and you can get feedback on your code. It might be good, might be bad. It might be in addition to your code. It might be something which is, hey, you're doing this great this way. You can add this extra little thing here, or you can get this and you can do it a bit more efficiently that way, right? So you can benefit. People who are reading your code can benefit. Transparency is touted as a feature of open source. It's one of those things where all bugs are shallow is what's termed. I don't know how shallow that. What was it? The X something shell bug thing. I think it was shallow. I don't know if it was very visible, considering that, you know, it took one person to sort of notice that their SSH connections were taking 0.1 microseconds longer than what they should have. But it was seen, right? You know, you can have stuff out there. You can have people. If you're putting an app out, for example, I'm putting Swift Dialog out. It's a compiled app, all right? It's a signed app. But anyone who's using it can go and have a look at the code, right? And they can have opinions based on that. They can have a look at it and they can see if I'm doing something dodgy. They can have a look at it and see that I'm being completely clean. So, you know, when I'm putting stuff out there, it's not so much saying, hey, look, just trust me. It's okay. It's fine. It's more like, don't trust me. Have a look at the code for yourself. If you don't trust my compiled app, go download the source code, validate it, and compile it yourself. All right. It's a learning opportunity. I dove into Swift Dialog without having done any Swift UI at all. I will stand before you and say that the whole .1, or probably up until version 1.8-ish, somewhere around there, it was very much a voyage of discovery. All right, so it was reading the documentation, finding out a cool thing, implementing it, reading some more documentation, and then going, wow, I did that wrong. I'll go back and redo that. Especially once people started using it, I sort of felt a bit more responsibility to make sure I was doing it right. I hope I've got it right. You know, people tend to use it. Flexibility, that sort of ties into the transparency thing. So, you know, you have options as to how you can run this code, right? You can take the app as delivered. You know, you can download it yourself, compile it yourself. You know, that's a benefit that you're giving people. Accessibility, code's open, everyone can get to it. All right. You're providing something for free. You don't have to provide it for free, by the way. You can sell open source code. It's happened before. Peer review. If you get enough interest, specifically with stuff, if you're in a community and a lot of people are doing, like, you know, in Mac admins, we're doing a lot of Bash, we're doing a lot of Python, right? So you can throw your stuff out there and people can come back with their opinions about it. That can be good. Reputation, don't go into it seeking reputation. If it happens, it'll come to you, trust me. But you know, from this kind of thing, speaking from experience, once if this does happen, then it makes you want to be better at what you're doing. All right. So, you know, not that I'm sort of sitting here going, oh, you know, crushing under the weight of responsibility of trying to make sure that everyone's happy and all this stuff and everyone's got the thing. Not quite like that, but it's just making sure that whatever I do, right, whenever I put it out, that I'm doing it with consideration. I'm not just, you know, throwing stuff out there and without sort of care. So you want to put your code out there, but you have some concerns, all right? So one of the main concerns is that people are going to look at my code and they're going to judge me. That may happen. You will never find out. I have had when I first Swift Dialog out, it was 2021-ish, I think, somewhere around there. I have exactly 0 people who have commented on the quality of my code, other than me. Right? I'll look at my code and I'll comment on the quality of my code. And but yeah, I've had no one sort of come to me and say, hey, this is crap. Conversely, I've had no one come here and say, this is the best code I've ever seen. All right. Don't worry about it. It's cool. If other people are going to use your stuff, you want to document it. Documentation is good. A lot of open source tools don't have a lot of documentation. If you do a lot of Linux desktop admin, you will find this out. There is not a lot of documentation. Encourage people to give you feedback. All right, you won't get feedback if you don't ask for it. If you just put something out there, people they'll either use it or they won't. Someone might come up to you at a conference and say, hey, I'll use your thing, and that's really great, and all that sort of stuff. The kind of feedback I'm thinking of here is this could be done differently, or have you thought about doing this a certain way, or could you add this feature, or stuff like that. So you want to get out there, and you want to, if you're looking for ways to improve the stuff that you're putting out, encourage people to contact you and provide multiple ways, right? So on GitHub, there's discussions. You can file feedbacks on discussions. I've created a channel on Mac Admin Slack. People can get me multiple ways. So, do that. Respect other people's work. So if you do get people, someone will do a PR into your code base. Don't just flat out reject it and say, this crap doesn't meet my standards. Go away. All right. Be respectful of other people committing to your stuff or supplying, opinions or feature requests or anything like that. You'll get a lot of things which you don't want to do. It's okay to say no. How you say no is what matters. So yeah, be respectful of people and be respectful of what they sort of do, and be patient with people. You'll get some people who will use your thing and use it the way that you didn't intend it to be used. Maybe that's something which you can feed back into a feature, all right? Or maybe that's something which you can feed back into your documentation to say, don't use it this way, it's not going to work. Prepare for criticism or attacks. You probably won't get any, all right? That doesn't say it won't happen. You may get people giving you feedback that you don't like, all right? Don't take it as an attack or a criticism, even if it's intended that way. It's open. A response to that would be, that's great. Code's there, feel free to fork it. Go off and do your own thing, that's fine. Mitigating against risks. As a benefit to open sourcing, this is again where we're going back to, all bugs are shallow. It's cool for other people to look in your code. You probably won't get notified if there's a security issue with your code. You might get questions about people asking if you have done a security scan of your code. So you might want to look into that kind of stuff. If you're doing code level stuff that has the ability to be scanned for security vulnerabilities, depending on what kind of code you're writing. I don't know why I put that slide in there. Maintaining your project. So you put your stuff out there, it's great. A few people are using it, this is great. Don't let it sit there. Don't sort of put it out and say, all right, this is it, this is the version, and then don't touch it for the next 10 years. If you're putting your code out there for people to sort of consume and use, do it with the expectation that this is code that you are also using. And if you're also using it, you're always looking at it and saying, I can update this, or I can fix that, or I can typo that, or a new version of macOS has come out and it does this thing slightly differently. I'll just update it to make sure it does that thing. So, keep up with your documentation. Add a new feature, update documentation at the same time. I'm not the best at it, I try. If you notice anything missing, let me know. Version controls and releases are a good thing for people to track. If you release your changes under a version, people can pin that version and they can say, I like the way that this version works, I'm going to stick with it. Don't just push everything out as version 1.0 every time you compile the PKG. That can happen. Issue tracking communication, GitHub, GitLab, all those other Git places all have ways for people to contact you with issues and bugs. Not every issue or feature request has to be addressed. You can look at it and you can make comments on it and all that sort of stuff, but provide a way for people to get to you. Depending on your code, you might want to throw automated testing in. Even if it's a bash script, you can create a bash script and create a way to run that with a whole bunch of test data to make sure that it does every feature that you think it should be able to do. Jump in with community engagement. Again, we've got Slack, we've got ways to put discussions on GitHub. And it's a really great way to, for you personally, like your continuous learning and improvement. I've gone from not knowing any Swift UI to knowing way more than I thought I ever would. And to the point where if you are normally this kind of person where it's like, how do I do this? I'll go look up the documentations, I'll go to Google or I'll go to ChatGPT or whatever the case might be. Please don't go to ChatGPT and put the code straight into the thing and run it. Always vet it. That's a different thing. But yeah, you'll learn. It's great stuff. We're putting your things out there. You're not sitting in a void. Like I went through years of having all my management scripts and stuff like that sitting in my own private repo at work, keep them up to date. That's all great, but I'm in my own little bubble there, right? It's a feedback loop. As soon as I start putting stuff out there, I find it's great ways to sort of start updating. The way you improve over this is really great. Have a backup and recovery plan of your code. Just committing your code to GitHub may not be enough. All right. Can you pull your project down to a brand new machine and start compiling it from there if your one goes missing? All right. If you're signing with keys and all sorts of stuff, Xcode's really good about that these days. You can normally start getting up and running with a signing key and all sorts of stuff. But if you're using a corporate signing key, where's that kept? Is that on your machine because you generated it and you're the only one that uses the key? Did you lose the key? That's the end of that. I don't know what slide's there. Expectations, what's going to happen? All right, so you put your stuff out there. You're like, this is great. I'm going to share with the community. I'm going to get everyone coming in and helping me with my thing. All right. That's the commit history for Nudge. I took that screenshot yesterday. I'm third on the list. I haven't made a commit for 2 years. All right. So Eric's in there doing a lot of work. There's a lot of changes in Nudge. It does a lot of stuff. Since I'd made my last commit, I don't think I could go in there and actually understand what Nudge does anymore, code-wise. So yeah, maybe you might be the only person doing that. Nudge is a bit of a, maybe it's a bit niche, right? So, and it's been around, only been around since macOS 11. So an older project, like, what's that one? Oh, that's Swift Dialog. That's me. I've had a few commits. What about Munki? Munki is a very well used project. A lot of people committing to that, I think. We've got Greg and a few other people, and the number of lines committed dropped down pretty quickly. All right. So just be prepared that just because you're putting your stuff out there doesn't mean you're definitely going to get feedback. This is not no feedback, by the way. There are other people committing to these projects, of course. But just be prepared for what that balance of who's doing the actual coding versus, getting in there. You're not going to get, I don't think you're going to necessarily get a project where it's all of a sudden it's like you and like 10 other people and you're all jumping in and doing stuff and it's all cool. But let's say you can't write code. So I've said, great, go out, throw out your open source stuff, do the community thing, all that sort of what, and you're like, well, I can't do any of that. How can I help these projects that are out there? So you want to, submit your feedback, come up with your ideas. It's okay if you don't know how it works under the hood. You know how you think it should be working when you do this thing, right? It's okay to ask those questions. You can put in a feature request. You might get denied. The response might be, you can have that request if you write it. You might get me and you might nerd snipe me and I'll make the thing anyway. So here you go. There's also options for donating. You can donate time, money, positive vibes. All right. Anything you can do if you're using a product and you love it, tell the developer, I've had a bunch of people come around and say, thanks to me. It always feels good, even if it feels embarrassing. So be a good citizen. All right. Don't be a jerk to people. Don't ask them and say, hey, your product should do this. You didn't do that request and you suck because of it. So back to what I said before. Yes, put your stuff out. This is a repeat of the other slide, so these other things are still there. So resources for how to sort of go out with this kind of thing. GitHub, GitLab, that square thing is Bitbucket. I don't know if anyone knows that, but yes, that's a bucket apparently. So yeah, so these are good resources. They're public. You can go up there, create some free accounts, start putting your code up there. Presumably you've got permission to do so. If you are not comfortable hosting your own code under your own thing, MacAdmins has open source. So you can submit your thing to MacAdmins open source and say, hey, I've got this stuff. Can you guys host it for me? They might be able to help you out. Go ask on the MacAdmins Slack. There's a MacAdmins open source channel there. Speaking of, go to macadmins.org. There's a link there. You can go join the Slack if you aren't already on the Slack. Just some final words. Your code is fine, all right? Even if it's not, your code is fine. Don't worry about how it looks. Don't worry if you've put everything into one file instead of breaking it up into separate files. All right. If it does what you want it to do and people agree and they like it, then it's good. All right. And I'm just going to finish off with a quote. So if you're ever concerned about, oh, is this good enough or anything like that, or whatever it is, just remember, just shipping is a feature. All right. Really important person told me that. This guy. I was struggling and I was wondering, what am I doing here? I had massive imposter syndrome. What right do I have to be writing apps for people to use? And Charles helped me out, and that's the last thing he said to me. Thank you very much for listening. Hopefully that was worth it.
Any questions?
Okay.
I'll run there first. You just wanted to see me run, didn't you?
I watch. Thanks for that, Bart. I'm just curious on a philosophical level, what do you think success in one of these projects looks like to you? Is it just getting it out there, having lots of people use it, knowing you've made a difference, maybe getting some sort of financial reward? What chance to be a fine thing? I don't know.
For me personally, success was publishing. So just publishing it, even if I'm the only person using it, that was my goal. So the exercise for me with Swift Dialogue was something that I'd written internally for our organization. And I thought, this is really generic. It's got none of our assets in it or anything like that. Approach work, can I open source it? They said, yeah, here's a page, here's a license, here's how to go through all that sort of stuff. So for me, it was just the putting it out there. I mean, that was at a personal level, that kind of hurdle of doing that. And all the rest of it, all the growth and all that sort of stuff has sort of like come from that. All right. So that's like icing on the cake for me. So.
You made a joke of, the not being too worried about your code being out there and stuff like that. But from a mental health point of view, how do you actually cope when you see that your code, that your app, for instance, is being used so bloody often now? Like, surely there are moments that you do have a little freak out about how popular your product has become, and how do you deal with those tiny little moments, even if they're fleeting?
I don't. No, it's take it for what it is. It's someone that's saying that they've used your stuff and they like it. And, every time someone says that, I honestly feel like I'm privileged that they are letting me into their lives. So, I just try to respect that. And I use that as motivation to, when looking at, the next thing next change I put in, or the next thing I publish or anything like that, I'm just making sure that my quality is up to the expectation that I would think would come from someone else's code. So if I'm using someone else's app or product or anything like that, then I would like to think that it's, worthy of being run in production in my environment. So I treat my own code that way. So every time someone says that to me, it's just reinforcing that position. And that's my mindset when I should be, pushing out the next release. Don't just put in a feature, go, yep, cool, compile, push that out, and that thing just introduced like 15 bugs. Like, I got to make sure that I test and all that sort of stuff. So I'm more careful with that now.
Given you're wearing the hat of the developer and the tester, I suppose, how do you sort of approach something like Swift Dialog with, say, WWDC coming up?
Yeah. I mean, if they want to Sherlock me, that's great. I don't think they will.
Probably not. No.
Probably not. Yeah. So what I kind of look for is because I'm sort of got to cater for products that, you know, like there's still environments out there with people running Ventura or something like that. So at the moment, minimum's Ventura. If Apple come out with something that is really great and only works in macOS 15, right? It's the best thing ever. Past me would have just gone, well, crap, I can't use that. Doing all this coding and lots of stuff, I've learned a bit. And now I know, I can actually use it because I can just make an extension. I can say, well, if you're running this version of macOS, you can do this. And if you're not running that macOS version, you just do the basic thing. So stuff like I think I gave a demo on Monday of the animating rainbow thing. That's a macOS 14 thing only. Right. So if you're on macOS 14, you get the animating rainbow. If you're on another version of macOS, you don't get that. So I can now build in that support sort of stuff. So I kind of look at new things coming in from WW and all that sort of stuff as like, great, I'm going to be node sniped again.
Bart, I think you did a really good job of identifying a bunch of the ways that people who aren't coders can contribute. And I remember Greg Nagel mentioned something on the MacAdmin podcast that stuck with me too, that he said, you can help by answering questions in the MacAdmin Slack for the product, because often plenty of us have built up expertise on, let's say, autopkg or munki. And it doesn't have to be Greg answering the questions all the time, right? And I thought that was I hadn't thought of that one, but I thought that was interesting, and then there's, like for me, autopkg, I teach it. I give it back that way, right? But what I wanted to follow up with you, I know when you proposed this talk, I'm going, kind of the weight of doing open source. So how do you manage that? Like even dealing with me when we were bashing it in outset and overrides and stuff like that, because I hadn't adopted it, and it's like, I worked on that 6 months ago. Like, how do you manage that kind of I'll call it the weight of putting something out there as well?
So in that example, like with outset and stuff like that, I treat everyone coming in and asking a question as they're asking a question because they don't know the answer, right? So that's obvious. Because if they did know the answer, they didn't know how to work it, they wouldn't be asking the question, right? So you have to sort of like respect that bit and just treat those questions as a educational opportunity for the person asking the question. I'm trying to do this and it's not working. It's like, well, rather than saying, well, you're stupid, you didn't know how to use it, right? Is to educate. And you say, well, that's fine. Like, here it is. And actually, in the process of you asking that question, maybe my documentation's not up to date, right? And I can sort of go, yeah, okay, you've asked that, other people might ask the same thing, right? So there's no real, for me, there's no real weight for it. It's just, it's cool. I like helping people. It's fine. To your other point, in the Swift Dialog channel, generally, like if someone asks a question in there, it's either Adam Gadega or Trevor Sisek gets in there and answers it before I can get in there, even if it's nighttime over there, which is, I don't think Trevor actually sleeps because he's always awake. He's always online. So yeah, I'm very thankful for those guys doing that. I've never asked anyone to do support on my behalf, but I am very thankful that happens. And yeah, from those two, that's a great way for them to support me, and that's more than what I could ask for.
All right,
I'm done.
Thank you for the presentation, but most importantly, thank you for the work you do. Everybody using it, if that's not enough of a testament to how great it is, I think another round of applause for what you've created and how widespread it is. Thank you.